Welcome to Now in Zen. On today's podcast, we have Johnny Reinhard. He is the head of the American Festival of Microtonal Music, and he plays a tuning on his bassoon that uses 128 notes per octave, unequally spaced, and he's gotten a lot of other ensembles to play that. He's also fond of pieces from earlier eras in different tunings to show sort of the thought processes behind those pieces. Welcome to the show, Johnny. Thanks for being on.
Okay. Do you know this book?
Johnny Reinhard, is it Bach and tuning?
There's 2 chapters relating to this that's different and explains why I don't have the same definition of modulation. In a short sense, I always say in 128 there's no modulation because what is the cause for modulation? It's for variety. It's to stretch out a piece of music. You see the history of music, you see the whole thing, how it developed. You know, monophony, and then how it's heterophony, and you see the whole thing with tropes and double, actually having the speed of tropes more often, and then building on it a second voice and a third. And when all of this idea, when you had mean tone keyboards, and you were interested in something that I love, improvisation, then you're going to find a point where you can't keep modulating. You're stuck. You get a wolf. It's so different. You need a well temperament to have a full circle. So the reason for equal temperament is improvisation, which nobody says. Nobody understands it that way. But that's what Buxtehude was all about. That's what Werckmeister was all about. He was an improviser. He only has like 4 pieces that exist and maybe there were more, but he was an improviser. So it's only through that. And then I have another chapter, which is called the Thuringian Aesthetic of Irregularity.
Ooh.
And so by going to Thuringia and analyzing as a scientist everything about its geometric shapes will lead you to believe that this center of Germany, isolated from the Thuringian forest and the Alps, this area likes things that don't have 90-degree angles. Saxons do. Leipzig had it, but not exclusive, because they were enjoying the Thuringian irregularity, not just from J.S. Bach, but from Kuhnlau before him. So the aesthetic is irregular. That's the extent. That's why it makes all the sense in the world that Bach is not equal temperament. It's his culture, which again, is something that's not looked at. I would say I looked at it as an ethnomusicologist. That's why I would say it's different. And I will also say it's different because I hear numbers.
I hear numbers. I hear numbers. I hear numbers. I hear numbers.
So when I write down all these numbers, I actually hear what I'm writing about. And it's not people's normal. And that's why I wrote a book about it. I'm excited to meet Tone Koopman next in November, because he was reading the book and he emailed me. And if you're not familiar with him, he's this very famous Bach conductor from the Netherlands, who happened to use Werkmeister 3 before any contact. Right? The contact just happened last week. So I'm excited, and that's why I'm hoping people get this. So let's do the sense thing. I wanted to show you the one sense. So I'm holding up a recorder. I've been taking off my tape because I usually one more. Because I tape it up with 5 pieces to put it in mean tone. So now it's in equal temperament. Pure fifth. It's not anymore 5-1. Or it is, but it's different. Now here's the one in the middle. Wait. That's right. Well, let's move.
Yeah, I can hear that. That's really 2 cents?
That's 1 cent.
1?
Yeah. In between, look.
That sounds something like 20.
This is the fifth. I'm not changing that. I'm going to go lower.
It's doing that. Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm
only going between. I put one in the middle. That's 1 cent.
Well, I don't know if it's 1 cent, but it's definitely little.
It's 1 cent. What else could it be? If I'm going from equal temperament fifth to pure fifth, there's only 2 cents there. And then I'm finding one in the middle. It has to be 1 cent. There's no other way it can be anything else.
I had an experience with this recently that had to do with John Jansen's harmonic guitar at UN12, so West Virginia. There are 2 notes that are played on the harmonic guitar that are supposedly an archytus comma apart. It's like 64 over 63. So that's the difference between several 5-limit intervals and 7-limit intervals that are pretty common. It's like it's the difference between the harmonic 7th, 7 over 4, and the minor 7th, or one of them, 9 over 5. and it's also the difference between some other intervals. So when John was playing these harmonics on his guitar, I should have heard something like 27 cents. But it definitely sounded a lot larger than that. It almost sounded like a quarter tone. So I'm wondering if maybe perhaps, as I continue to listen to microtonal intervals, my sense of widening just sort of continues to increase, and I'm sort of able to hear smaller and smaller gradations. But, I doubt I can hear, like, a cent in performance. I don't think that can happen.
Well, one of the big jokes we have in my group, and everybody acknowledges what I hear, so it's like I'm not having any mutiny or anything.
Sure.
And my friend Josh, by the way, who is, as a pianist, somebody who presses buttons, okay, let's be honest.
Yeah.
He does hear 1 cent. I mean, I know that he hears 1 cent. So not every pianist doesn't hear. I mean, he really does hear the difference from one tuning to the next. And definitely after this interview, you and the listeners should listen to the Concord Sonata by Charles Ives in the only transcendental recording ever made. And I'm saying that with a certain amount of hubris, I guess, because I produced it. I certainly didn't play it. And I didn't tune it either. I had to, I just arranged the tuning. And it's, of course, the American Festival of Microtonal Music. And it was performed brilliantly by two pianists, not one, because you want to have 24, actually 25 pitches, because there's an extra pitch that Ives knew he could use because it wasn't being used by any other, by that octave at that, ever in the piece. So in the middle, he could take a note and turn it into a double flat.
A 25th pitch. So that's what the 25th pitch is.
Right.
That's fascinating.
That's right.
So it would be an unequal 25-note scale?
Yes.
Fascinating.
And a good friend of mine and the world famous specialist on tuning, Mark Lindley, he was so thrilled when he heard the third movement, the altots, that it's so consonant, right? It's just intonation to him. He thought, there's no difference. And he says, it's been my theory for years. And he contacted the Grove Dictionary while I was there and sent it to the guy making the textbooks in Texas and, constantly bringing it to the attention of Europeans. We sent out 5, I think. So to him, it fulfilled, he's 85 or so, it fulfilled his dream that pure Pythagorean tuning, of 2 octaves at least, simulates just intonation. I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm not saying I don't hear it differently. I know that, I shouldn't say this because that's a name and he doesn't have a chance to say anything about it. Not that it's a defense that's required. But I know people who have, really they're in love with just intonation.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say the Harry Partch gamut. And they can't hear Pythagorean 2 octaves. They just can't listen to it. And when I listen to it, I hear it differently than the Harry Partch just intonation. So hats off to Mark Lindley, who at least physically liked it. And I did say to him, you realize, Mark, that you only like 1% of all the music I like. You don't listen to it. 99% of what I do, you don't even care about the other 3 movements of the piece. You only want that movement. So, that's a little side thing about it.
Well, yeah, that's so inspiring that there was all this excitement generated over the performance. Would you say that reinterpreting works in a microtonal way has been a helpful catalyst for just, excitement?
First of all, it's not reinterpreting, it's interpreting.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
Because Ives made these changes to his music so it could be interpreted. And no one is doing it except I did. And there's room for other people to do it. But look, I'm still surprised anybody, and I know somebody just did it, would make a new recording of the Concord when there's so many, not as many as Beethoven's Fifth has, but still so many.
Right.
Why wouldn't it's only ego and practicality and maybe even a little expense that might prohibit you from performing a fully transcendental performance, meaning transcendental, which has been so muddied. And I do muddying too. I'm not against muddying if it's more closer to the truth, as Ives would say. Vagueness is the closest to the truth. Mm-hmm. This is the real interpretation of what he really wanted, to transcend the regular piano and the regular musician and the regular audience and the regular expectations.
Yes.
It's time to transcend them. That's what this performance does. I hear it, but I really am honest that, not everybody hears it. I don't blame anybody. Not everybody hears the same things. And I agree with you, Stephen, that you can train your ear, and there's no reason why you won't be able to hear more than you hear now. I would say, though, this is a standard joke. I didn't get a chance to tell it, which is that the musicians that have perfect pitch, and there's a bunch of them, like Dave Agar on cello, for example, the star of Odysseus has it. They only hear 2 cents. Like my friend Dan Auerbach, the violinist, he has perfect pitch. And he'll tell me, and we teach classes together, high school classes. We get grants for this.
Yeah.
And I can tune up a band. You just won't believe how in tune the band is. I had a band playing Scriabin's Mystic Chord and Just Intonation the last time.
Oh, yeah.
There were no other adults in the room. So only the students knew what they were doing. And even they didn't know what they were doing, but they were doing it. So I hear twice as well as somebody with perfect pitch. If people with perfect pitch keep telling me 2 cents is their threshold, and I hear 1, that's twice as good as them.
Well, I mean, that's like, there are different thresholds, right? So melodically, I'd say, I wouldn't be able to grab anything like 15 cents or something, If there's just a free melody happening, unless there's something very, very specific that's going on that allows me to notice that. But then, of course, a harmonic situation is much different. Like in an earlier podcast episode, I'm comparing the major third of 16 tone equal temperament, which is 375, to the just one, 386. And that little, like...
A just one.
Yeah,
right?
A just one. So, the difference is you can really, really hear it in harmony because that little sag of the 375 cent major third is just sort of noticeable as a timbral quality. And then playing them side by side, I think it's a lot harder to notice. So, yeah, I think when I get below, like, maybe, like, something around, like, the 15 to 20 cent range is, like, this really, really, like, laser-thin area where it's hard to really tell what's going on without harmony to really enforce how in tune a note is. And, of course, people can hear, like, 2 cents and stuff like that. I mean, I'd say I can hear 1 or 2 cents in a situation where it makes that easy, like, like piano tuning, of course, is a great example of situations where you have to be able to hear those really tiny little timbral differences and sort of get them to lock into each other.
Well, that was the big thing about George Frederick Handel, is he used to tune up the keyboards melodically.
Oh, really?
And then, and then that famous book came out called Tuning from that Michigan keyboard piano tuner.
Yeah.
And he said, no, you can't hear that. You can't melodically hear that to do that. But I'm telling you, some people can, okay? So I actually taught myself to do it. And the technique is not dissimilar from what I showed you from the 1 cent. If I can set up a frame of 2 cents, then I can find the middle. You can't easily go from one to a place, but you can find the middle between 2 places.
Yes, that's exactly what I do in ear training.
But only if it's a small frame. If I give you a frame, if I give you the 7th harmonic, which is 128, by the way, beam, that's 969 cents.
Yeah.
All right. So sing the note in the middle.
Ba, 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 ba. Probably not very good. Sounds a little low.
It's not human to do it. And I can't do it. If the frame is a quarter tone, you can do it.
Oh,
you
yeah.
can take
Well, that's really easy, stepwise.
If the frame is a quarter tone, put it in thirds, right? You'd be able to split it up.
Yeah.
And if you keep splitting things up, you get to this 1 cent threshold. And maybe further, but no reason. So I'm doing it melodically, and I know this idea of 5. Seashore said years ago, it's 1 cent harmonically, 5 cent melodically is the threshold. And it's only some people. And his 1 cent was based on what you're talking about, hearing beats, really.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? And his 5 cent was not hearing harmony behind it. But when I do Harry Partch, I think I'm the only person who's done Harry Partch without perfect pitch.
What? A bunch of the members of the Partch ensemble don't have it.
Now, like Corey doesn't have it. We talked in Salzburg recently.
Does John Schneider have it? I don't think he does.
No, but yes, that's true. That's true. So it's really, but it's the new group because Dean Drummond always picked people with perfect pitch. Harry Partch had perfect pitch. Harry Partch picked people with perfect pitch.
Right.
So it was perfect pitch heavy thing.
Yeah, Ben Johnston as well and stuff like that.
I'm going to tell you, I hear mistakes by Harry. Sometimes it's alcohol, sometimes it's excitement,
Yeah.
sometimes it's his physical movement changes what he's saying. And he changed what he wrote. I mean, there's a beautiful song in the springtime on the south side of the Yangzee Kyang, which he never did. And it's got, I counted 72 different pitch inflections. Yeah, 1932. It has pluses and minuses next to some of the ratios.
Wow, so you mean ones that Partch wrote, or?
He wrote them outside of his ability really probably to do it. And he never, and I've recorded it. I've put it out. I don't know anybody else really, maybe somebody else did. I know that when the 72 tone people in Boston did an arrangement of Lipo songs, it's 72. It's not even Partch's harmony anymore. Now, maybe a lot of people can't hear that.
It'd be interesting to compare.
But I compare to John Schneider, and I compare to Harry Partch, and I'm hearing the number exactly in my head, even if I don't sing it right.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I know what that is. It's like there's, if you're reproducing a pitch, sometimes you're thinking one, and what comes out is a bit different.
Right, and this is not in any way trying to explain performance prowess or performance error. Okay, it's irrelevant of that. It's a phenomenon that. But, I'm saying you can learn to hear integers. And I remember I had a lot of difficulty in graduate school with dictation and solfege.
Yeah.
Because they didn't know how to teach my ears.
Earlier, we were talking about movement and how maybe Harry Partch was moving around when he was performing and how that affected the recording. Can you talk about the types of vibrato that you use when you're performing the bassoon and how you account for timbre differences between very small pitches?
Well, sometimes the vibrato has to be chosen in terms of the starting frequency and the ending frequency, which then can be an accordion and move in and out. And I say that because you don't always want to start on pitch. The vibrato is for kind of a breathing feeling. So the breathing should happen. Otherwise, you're just pressing a button for vibrato. And we spoke about different kinds, there's some avant-garde vibratos where you shake your head back and forth like something like that. Or you do a lip vibrato, or you do diaphragmatic. It's inside your body, your muscle framework. Which you could speed up and slow down. Or you could take the instrument, and I'm a bassoon player, so I could shake the instrument into a kind of, I call it a fender vibrato, because it sounds so automatic, that kind of thing. Or one finger on the vocal of the bassoon, little subtle thing. Or combinations again. And then I joke with you about a chili pepper vibrato.
Right, the best kind.
Kind of an aftertaste.
Have a lot of players notated specific vibratos for you? It seems like an interesting way to explore pitch within the 128 note tuning.
I'm so taken by a book I've been reading called The Singing Neanderthal and getting into my inner Neanderthal, which I believe is possible, coming from what I call ethnic stock memory theory, where you inherit the emotional experiences of your ancestors. And, there's nothing more distinguishing about Neanderthals than the music world they live in. And so I lately, really recently, I've been thinking about how much of the way I listen is because I'm using genes from Neanderthals that other people aren't using. Here's a picture. I want to give you a picture. Okay? Came from the book, so it's not original. I can't even find it. I've been looking for it. Imagine this. And none of this would be in the historical record. But you got the Neanderthals in caves, lighting the fire every night with a mammoth skull for a bass drum, a bunch of bones to clack back and forth, dancing by the fire against the shadowing as full entertainment every night with the instinct to move their head rapidly to any new sound that might enter, because that's the way they heard and listened. So a lot of this is just getting in touch, I think, with a more musical person, and I see them as people, and I'm using this new definition of speech as something that puts music away, but is really just a form of breath.
Are you interested in the ways that speech and music intersect? Sometimes when I listen to melodic lines that you play in 128 tuning, some of the very microtonal ones that use a lot of pitches remind me of speech.
Yes, and very much with Harry Partch again, because he started off with intoning voice. Everything he did in the beginning was non-harmonic. It was all melodic, trying to capture native speech. So I guess I'd be foolish to say I wasn't influenced on some level. But I'm writing a solo, supposedly. I shouldn't say supposedly. I'm really writing a solo. I haven't started it, really. For voice. For voice. And voice, of all things, is at the least advantaged by 128. If you don't have perfect pitch, you're lost in a maze of mazes.
Depends on your writing.
So I asked the vocalist that I'm writing for, and she said, as few, as simple as possible, please. And she's a microtonalist. You know, without perfect pitch, what am I going to do for her? Get a glockenspiel?
Guide tracks. But you don't do that.
I have to think about it. But who would have thought it's starting a new kind of thing? In a way, 128 is a new kind of thing. I've compared it to just intonation. And, you know, where we can agree, fine, but it's not just intonation as the culture of music that we have inherited.
So 128 tuning, another thing I wanted to talk to you about, is made up of frequency ratios. But they generally hang out in the higher harmonics a lot of the time. And they're close to a lot of notes from 12th tone equal temperament, right?
Well, what's the higher harmonics? 17 and up?
I guess.
So you're talking about a very small vocabulary underneath that. And it's a vocabulary we avoid. So basically the sound vocabulary is distinctive between both. Everything is just straight integers, and that's it. But if Pythagorean theory, which has nothing to do with Pythagoras, is not just intonation, even if Mark Lindley, an expert, thinks so, then 128 is still another example of an untempered tuning.
Yeah, so what advice would you give to people who are trying to play in 128 or write music in 128? Because I think, you know, there are a lot of microtonalists who don't deal with a lot of notes.
Well, the great fear for composers is that they won't be able to get their players, and we're not talking about emotionally willing, we're talking about physically able to find fingerings in different notes, right?
Yeah.
So you're, first of all, you're asking a person who could figure that all out on his own. So therefore, I didn't have to think about that. I have to empathize with it. And, the best thing for 128 is join a group in 128.
Yeah.
Once the Finns did that, Dan and I joined them. My violinist joined. And, they had a couple of bass players, another bassoonist. It was an enhanced group. And so when they were playing 128, 3 different performances, right? They don't need me anymore. They know what they're doing. Everybody's in 128 now. Now, every composer that comes to it does it differently. Johnny Eaton, one of the first.
Yeah.
Very different. Georg Friedrich Haas. Two days he wrote this incredible, challenging, difficult piece.
Wow.
Which I try to make look simpler and simpler every time I play it. I try.
Right.
And then you have all these others. You have Peter Thogerson. Peter's able to, he feels the 128. He knows it.
Yeah.
So I don't have to tell him how to do it. And one piece comes out, the next piece, next piece. He's taking advantage of different sequencing, right? He can sequence. He's also a percussionist, so he's doing rhythmic things that make it sound like I'm playing on the cymbals right now. I'm doing a little roll on the tom. And in this case, it's not a vibrato, it's a flutter.
Right.
So I've got to do all these flutter tonguing, which is really hard to keep on pitch. You know, it's one thing to go, it's another to go, and make it exactly on pitch. But, it's fantastic, actually. And then Anton Rovner in Russia's written like 4 pieces in 128. Lined it up for my friend Dan. Can I show you Dan's piece? This is the only piece I've ever written that's never been performed.
Ooh, I like the handwriting. Does it say string theory? Of course. Yeah.
It's called string theory. It's in 4 movements. The first movement is solar system. Second one is Drake equation. The third is universe. And then the fourth is called alternate dimension.
So this is all in 128, and this would be a new piece that you're writing that may be played sometime in...
Oh, it's written. It's all written.
Yeah, it's all written.
It's the first page.
Oh my. That looks deeply microtonal, and I can't wait to hear it.
Well, each movement is in a different subset. So in the first movement, it's a 16-note scale based on the first 5 octaves. And then after that, movement number 2 would be the next octave. And then the next octave. And then the next one, which would be the 8th. 5, 6, 7, 8.
Is the 128 tuning an octave equivalent scale? Like, is it the same in every octave, or?
Yes, unlike Bowles Pierce, yes.
When you notate 128 tuning, are you using just 12-tone with cent deviations as your notation?
Yes. Not 12-tone, quarter tone.
Quarter tones.
Then the number of deviation is never more than 49.
Right.
And even that would be -1. You wouldn't put 49, you put -1. I had to come up with a name for each interval. And I can't be like, hunting and changing, and they're less important than usual because people don't use them. Right. It's not like a name that someone's going to say, give me this pre-octave. Pre-octave? What's that? Well, it's 7 cents lower, than the octave.
And then pseudo octaves, I guess, would be a little bit lower than that.
Haven't tried that one.
In your fretless guitar concerto with what's his name? Michael Hafftka?
That's it.
His guitar playing is so skilled. Was he using any particular technique to get those notes in 128?
Yes. He's playing fretless.
Yeah.
Acoustic that's amplified with acoustic instruments, strings and bassoons. And he's got a little electronic device on the top near the frets by the low G string that will show him where he is on certain notes that he wants to capture in 128. But he's got experience playing he has a studio in his home. So we already made a whole album of quartets that are available. And, the fact that we can even do that with no planning, right? So when I say no mistakes, this is all straight played in the studio. So then to come out, so what I did is I put the fretless guitar piece into 3 movements, and I put pitch sheets in front of them, which pitches to move to, that would, like all my pieces, nobody gets to play the same note. Everybody avoids the lowest harmonics because they're part of the color of the timbre and they interfere with the harmony. Mm-hmm. And also, I want it to progress. So I want different notes in each movement. So it's a different substrate, you might say, substrata.
Is that the secret?
Well, this is something I didn't tell you yet, but I want to tell you about.
Oh.
It had no rehearsals.
Oh, my God.
I've never had a piece of music with no rehearsal before. Never.
That's insane.
Unless it was totally improv. But this was no rehearsal.
Wow.
There was no time. We were at Spectrum, and there was no time. And when we were ready to rehearse, Hafftka was downstairs in the restaurant with friends. I could talk with them individually beforehand, but that was it.
Wow.
You can say whatever you want to say about that piece, but for it to have no rehearsals should not make sense.
But it does.
by the way, Odysseus had no rehearsal either. Odysseus had one rehearsal. That's the difference. I'm sorry, did have one rehearsal. And they had sectionals. But the rehearsal was out of order outside the church at Columbia University in the rain. We weren't allowed inside. There was a wedding. And they weren't going to let us in. They had already said we could, but wedding is money. So without any, on just a track of ground, out of order, because everybody wanted to get out of the rain. That was the rehearsal for this.
It's amazing that you can put things in 128 together so quickly with the American Festival of Microtonal Music. Do you have any tips for getting players who are sort of A, interested in microtones, and B, are proficient enough to sort of understand the system and want to work with it?
Number one, go after the double bass players.
Okay.
Because they're tuning perfect fourths, which are undertones, and undertones that are repetitious, which is as unnatural as exists. When there's a bunch of 128 open string tunings that make the instrument sound gorgeous and rich as opposed to like a cardboard box. So yes, I do have favorites. We talk about a favorite, the 43rd harmonic. It's a perfect fourth, 12 cents sharp. So instead of bum, 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 beam, ba-dum, beam, 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 bum, bum. Better harmonically, better melodically, that's your perfect fourth. 43rd harmonic, that's my sale.
Historically, the perfect fourth was considered a dissonance at one time. Did that factor into your decision at all to use 128 tuning?
Historically, slavery was good. Historically, people were cannibals and ate other people. Historically is not a reason.
Yeah, you're right. How did you find your fingerings for the 128 tuning? And then were you able to share those easily with other woodwind players, since woodwinds generally have the same fingerings?
All bassoon players I work with, there's at least 5 or 6. Not thousands, but 5 or 6. Actually, more than that, because I've given some master classes in different countries where people come up and I show how to do it. And we improvise first improv in Odessa, Ukraine, for example, with bassoon players. So I would say that the thing is like meditation, which I used to do and I still like to do, hope to do, which is you can't think of nothing. You have to think of one thing first. And from one thing, you can go to nothing. When I figured out how to hear my first microtone where I didn't have to trust somebody else, then I can go to the whole gamut, which is why Korea was called Sonido 13, the 13th sound.
Yes.
Once he added the one new pitch, he opened it up to everything, even bigger than 96, which is known for.
Yeah.
In Mexico, I got a nice big review in Monterrey that said that this is the continuation of Korea 128. And he said 128 was the best thing on the program. We don't have a recording of it, though. That's Mexico. I did what I could. They gave me something. I heard something, So, but if I'm producing, and I would say to everybody listening, produce as if you're going to get the best stuff possible. You don't know.
Yeah.
And you can't trust anybody. You cannot trust anybody. Even the players don't know. When I did the Concord Sonata, nobody thought we'd have something that I could produce and put out. Everybody thought people would cough. There's no coughs. There's one cough. I leave it in to show it's live. then there's no, yeah. And then they thought, okay, there's going to be mistakes. These guys didn't make mistakes. Then they said, oh, well, it's going to sound like 2 players. No. If you don't tell people it's 2 players, they can't even tell.
Yeah, just don't tell them.
Most people would just think it's but I'm not going to do that either, right? Like, I didn't have to tell you that my guitar concerto had no rehearsals. But it goes to the success of both 128 and the piece and the players that it works so beautifully.
Yeah, I definitely would love to talk about 128 tuning with more people because a lot of people have used it. Do you see 128 tuning as something that can sort of encapsulate any other tuning system's sound? Like, if I were to just describe any mode, like 6 large steps, 7 small steps, is there some kind of scale in 128 that would be able to replicate that really convincingly? Or is that something that's important to you?
It's not important to me. When they try to replicate 72 equal performances of just intonation, I don't feel it works for me. It might work for some, it doesn't work for me. That's being honest.
So you feel the individual tuning systems are too different to really try and have one big overarching system of notes imitate another smaller system?
What if I suggest to you it's like changing a poem from one language to another?
Well, that's a lot different. I think it's more like an accent.
No, accents are on top of the tuning. That's more phrasing. Tuning is our vocabulary. So if you're changing vocabulary, that's the changing of poetry into another language. And you have to equate it on your own. If I tell you the tritone is a consonant, because I'm using it as a consonant in 128 for years now. So, like, I don't have to, like, I don't feel like I have to prove anything. I'll say honestly, when I first introduced it on the Zen Harmonic Alliance group, there were a bunch of people who were very nasty.
Oh, that's too bad.
It's too bad, but, it came out to, when I look back on it, it's like people became acolytes in their lives in certain tuning systems.
Right.
And they're devoted to it, and they don't want to change it.
Yeah.
In fact, a very wonderful, great composer, I'll leave the name out for the moment, says, you're right about Bach. I read your book. You're completely correct, but I said something different, made recordings. I can't change it now because that's what I'm known for. I cannot take a risk.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, you can understand it, but it doesn't mean that you agree or you would do the same thing. All right, let me see what you think about something.
Okay.
Did you ever imagine when you first understood microtonality, to whatever degree, did you ever imagine there was such a thing as everything being untempered?
Yeah. I mean, I just consider that to be like, well, it's funny because
without limit.
Like the first thing I learned was about equal temperaments and stuff, and then I kind of learned just intonation in like maybe like a year. Like from 2015 to 2016, I kind of like got really familiar with it. So like now I know the language of it. But yeah, I mean, I've considered that. I feel like it would be for that kind of thing. It'd be really helpful to have like a free pitch situation, and then tune things by ear according to whatever you want to do.
The difference with 128 is every note is orientation. Like every time I start on a note, I could find any other note. Everything has a organic connection to every other note.
Yeah.
Unless you do it, like other things in music, they're experiential. You're going to have to do it to know what I'm talking about. I mentioned to you that the double bass changes its tone completely. I mentioned to you that the voice has a difficulty without perfect pitch to find. So in a way, it's easier for me even than a cello, because the cello has got to figure it out on a line. But me, even though I can't press and blow on a bassoon or any woodwind, I can put my fingers in a gripping, which is an actual old German word for it, and gripping. And you would grip the note, and it would come out, but it doesn't mean it comes out in tune because you can't press and blow. So what happens? You have to hear it in your head before you play it, which is really hard, especially for Haas.
Yes.
And I'm doing it, though, but it's really hard for me. And then the other thing is I have to hear it in my head, not just itself, but the phrase in my head before I play it.
Yes.
So it's all musical all the way across. I can't extract elements. That's wrong music teaching, frankly. When they teach you, first we're going to do rhythm for a week, then we're going to do pitch for a week. It's bad. You don't do elements like that because you never develop musicianship. You don't encourage musicality. You actually deform it. So this is a problem with music education. I say that as a music educator.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean I'm going to agree with everything music educators are taught to do. Anyway, I felt that way. I felt that, I just had learned that you could add all the stuff together. And I'm already polymicrotonal before that in my solo pieces like Dune, Zanzibar. Have you heard those by any chance?
Yeah, I have.
I don't feel, melodically especially, that there's any special value to staying in one particular tuning system. It does the audience no value at all. It's just the composer setting limits, and that's spreading your psychology. That's self-prophesizing. That will make something true no matter what. That's ideological. That's not music. That's not natural. If you're not honest in music making, pick another field. There are a lot of fields you could work in and not be honest. Just as we have musicians here as microtonals who are, I think this is worth mentioning, interested in all kinds of tuning systems and approaches. It's, I think, fair to say that we're going to be open to different kinds of people, different religions, different cultures, different languages. We're not the racist group, which again is history, is what we got inherited, institutionally and otherwise. And so there's no virtue to taking something from history. There's none.
Yeah.
So I think people have to start fresh.
Yeah. Absolutely. how do you conceptualize improvising? How do you talk about the pitch intelligently with other musicians, or is it just kind of like a free-for-all where you decide on a structure? I mean,
you start on any note and you bring in any other note, and the freshness is there immediately on the second note. Already, it doesn't sound like anything else. And not only you have 128 pitches to start on, come on, you could do that for your lifetime. Pick a different note. And you might get good at starting on a particular one that you like, but just do it differently this time. So it's a different universe. Now, is it express everything I ever need to express? Maybe not. Maybe that's why I'm a polymicrotonalist. Maybe that's why I might throw in a 5 equal tempered scale. Ba, beep, beep, ba, ba. I might do it. Or it might be 70, right? Yeah, it could be any kinds of things. I played in 22. I played in all kinds of different equal temperaments.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the ones that you do are more electronic or oriented, I think.
Yeah.
So I tend to. But for the bassoon, I have to be an equal temperament. That's going to take some, I would say, bigoted or prejudiced people to say, oh, you're an equal temperament. Oh, you have to use sense, which is based on equal temperament. Oh, you're not a microtonalist.
People say that? People say that sense is not microtonal enough?
If it's based on hundreds, they would say, no, it's based on the equal temperament. I know, but and then people were telling me this is just a theory. I say I'm not a theorist. I don't think of myself as a theorist, and I'm not naming it. If someone names it a particular way, that's up to them. To me, it's the 8th octave of the overtone series, which is right away too complex for most musicians. I think Igor Stravinsky is thinking in 128. I could see doing the whole Rite of Spring in 128.
Yeah, is that something you're planning on? Because that would be delightfully ambitious. I'd love to hear it.
A little too ambitious for me. I mean, I'm on the retiring side of things now, so no more universe symphony type things for me right now.
Okay, well, thanks so much. I think I'm gonna have to go now, so I'll see you later. Thanks for being on the podcast.
All right, man. Take care. Have a good one. All right. Pleasure, man.